Hello everybody, I'm Alek Koberna. Welcome in for the very first time to Casual Sports Report's newest show, featuring yours truly, Alek Koberna. This is Breakdown. Week by week, we're going to be putting out new content, breaking down what we're seeing in the college football landscape and landscapes beyond that. This week, though, in replacement of the Casual Sports Podcast, once again, we are bringing the top 12 to you live. So, we're going to go down this one by one, staying in the same place as last week. Miami, they won 44-41 over NC State. They're not in my personal top 12 list, but it hit the other two pretty high up. They won their last two games by a combined 8 points, one to NC State by 3, and then by 5 points to the University of Virginia. I haven't been impressed with them. I was impressed at the beginning of the season. I like Derek King. I think they have a lot of potential on the team, but they're not getting it done so far this season. Taking the biggest loss of the week, Georgia, falling down 6 spots after their big loss. To Florida, it wasn't the best game for them. They showed a lot of holes. They lost their starting quarterback as well. Stetson Bennett has been injured. We're thinking 2 to 6 weeks. He has an AC joint sprain. I believe it's in his shoulder. They're taking on Mizzou next week. They should get an easy victory. We'll get to see some of these other quarterbacks that have been touted huge for them. We don't know who the starter is going to be for this week, but we're expecting an exciting show nonetheless. Moving up, number 10, Oregon. The Pac-12 kicked off in dramatic fashion this week. Not for Oregon, though. They moved up from 11th spot in the last week. They beat Stanford, unquestioned. They looked good. They looked how we thought they would. No surprises there. They got Washington State coming up. We know Washington State in the past few years has been a lethal team, but without their head coach that obviously moved down to Mississippi State and is running the air raid offense, we got to wait to see what that team's actually going to do with a completely different style of offense than we've seen in the past few years. Number 9, biggest storyline of the season and the Big Ten, Indiana, coming up from unranked. They're dominating right now. They just beat Michigan 38-21. They beat them down. It was miserable to watch for most Michigan fans, I can imagine. As a Buckeye fan myself, I have to say it was pretty nice to see. But still, Michigan, obviously now Jim Harbaugh is going to be on the hot seat. Indiana's taking on Michigan State next week. They're tied for first place in the Big Ten with Ohio State. This is the team to look out for in the Big Ten right now. Obviously, everyone knows about Ohio State. They know that group is lethal. We're still waiting to see who's number 2. Penn State, Michigan have both fallen off. This isn't their year. It's not going to be. They can't bounce back. Michigan can still pull off a late year upset against Ohio State. It's still possible. It's a rivalry game. Doesn't matter how bad any team is. You know that's possible. Indiana, I believe it's 2 weeks from now, has to take on Ohio State. That's game of the season for the Big Ten this year so far. Then moving up, BYU. This team has been phenomenal, coming out of nowhere. 51-17 over Boise State. Boise State was ranked actually 25th at the time. BYU smacked them. They get to go into a bye week now, get some rest, get some rehab in there. But the biggest storyline, their Heisman quality quarterback, Zach Wilson. This guy is putting up massive numbers. He's playing like a video game. Yeah, I think he's 4th or 5th in the Heisman standings right now. You can check that out on our Twitter page at Casual Sports Rep. Now moving up, Cincinnati, they're actually dropping down 1 spot from last week. The Fighting Fickles, they're doing phenomenal, but they just slipped down a little bit because some teams popped up. They just beat up Houston. It was a good game by their standards. ECU is what they got next week. Should be no problem for them. Cincinnati expecting to stay inside of the top 8 going into next week. Moving up one more, Texas A&M, they're jumping up 2 spots. They beat South Carolina. South Carolina's now looking to fire their head coach, and kind of shocking a little bit, came out of nowhere. They got Tennessee coming up. We don't know if that's going to happen. It's under a COVID threat right now. If it was to happen, Texas A&M would be without over 12 starters in that ball game. They've been playing well so far this season. They took the one stumble earlier on. I think we need to stop punishing teams for losing to really good teams as much as we do, because when I'm having 2 top 5 teams go against each other, I can't punish one of them for losing because somebody has to lose at the end of the day. That's what's happened with Texas A&M a few times. Now Florida, they also moved up 2 spots. They absolutely eviscerated, dominated, and whooped around Georgia. It wasn't close. It wasn't fun to watch unless you're a Gators fan, because Georgia just showed that they just can't compete right now. This isn't their year, much like Penn State and Michigan from the Big Ten. this just isn't going to be the year. That doesn't mean they're not a good team. Georgia obviously has some good wins. They've played okay this season. I haven't been overly impressed. There's been a couple tight ball games that they really should have pulled away from. Now, Florida, Kyle Pitts is questionable for this Saturday's game against Arkansas. He's in concussion protocol. He took a bad hit in that Georgia game. We wish him the best of luck and wish him a speedy recovery. Now, a moment you've all been waiting for. After Clemson's loss to Notre Dame, how does the top 4 shake out? Well, without any further ado, there we go. Clemson coming in at number 4. It's actually not how I had this whole situation mapped out on my own personal bracket that I filled out. I kept Clemson up at number 2. I know they lost, but they were without their starting quarterback, Trevor Lawrence. They were also missing 3 to 4 other starters that I think played a huge role in that game. Obviously, DJ, sorry about pronunciation here, Uiagalelei, didn't play so well the first half. Second half, he bounced back. He was great. Almost led them to a phenomenal comeback there against Notre Dame. Notre Dame, on the other hand, they played great. They proved that they should be in this top 4. They proved they belong. Obviously, if they had lost, we'd be talking about a little bit of a different story here. But depending on how much they had lost by, they probably would only drop to 5. But they won, so it doesn't matter. We don't have to have that conversation. Notre Dame takes on Boston College this Saturday. But once again, COVID is kind of a question mark going into that one due to the events that happened after the Notre Dame Clemson game. So after Notre Dame won, the student section rushed the field. Now, per university's recommendation, the entire team and most of the university is under a COVID test right now. Everybody has to go in. Everybody's getting tested now because the students stormed the field. Brian Kelly, head coach of Notre Dame, had even said before the game, if we win this game, expect that crowd to get onto the field. I expect you guys to be into that tunnel as fast as possible. We can't get this contamination and ruin our season. Obviously, sitting here at number 2, the college football playoff rankings come out in 2 weeks, November 24th. So we'll get to see what the playoff committee thinks of that win for them. The loss for Clemson, it doesn't hurt them. Not at all. Because they didn't have Trevor Lawrence. Then they get the bye week. Trevor Lawrence is going to come back on 3 weeks rest to face FSU, a team that has been miserably struggling. It's been bad this season. They've had a lot of issues. They can't get it done. And here comes Trevor Lawrence, 3 weeks rest, hungry after a Clemson loss. Expect Clemson to put the whoop on FSU in 2 weeks. Then, Ohio State. They don't move in this position, which was kind of a question mark for some people because Rutgers gave them a little bit of a scare. You know, it wasn't much. Ohio State pulled away. They did what they were supposed to. They put up their numbers offensively. But they kind of struggled a little bit. There were some holes that showed up that really shouldn't have. Rutgers gave them a run for their money. Rutgers, though, is looking like a lot better team than they have in the past, especially this year in the Big Ten. With Big Ten is now up for grabs. Besides, we know Ohio State's going to be that guy at the top. But now we have a bunch of other teams, Northwestern, Indiana. They're sitting right there trying to get that top spot from Ohio State. Wisconsin, keep in mind, they've dropped out of our top 12. They only have 1 game under their belt. And that they're 1-0. And they looked great in that game against Illinois, but we haven't gotten to see them any other time. So expect something out of Wisconsin, too. There's a lot of teams in the Big Ten. And after kind of a weak performance against Rutgers, the team Ohio State normally wins by, 40 or 50. I think Ohio State, it was still like 49 to something. There were some parts of that team that they shouldn't have given that many points up to a team like Rutgers. All props to Greg Schiano for putting together a great game plan to take on Ohio State. The trick plays in that game, I think he used about half of his playbook, if not 100% of it, just to try and pull back into that one. Kind of questionable that was the spot you want to pull it out at. But hey, it worked. They pulled off a good performance in all actuality. Ohio State gets to go up against Taulia Tagovailoa next week with Maryland. He's had 6 touchdowns, 1 interception in his last 2 games. Great performances by him. But then the other quarterback, Justin Fields of Ohio State, 11 touchdowns and 11 incompletions for this entire season. He has 87.8% pass completion right now. Phenomenal video game numbers. He's tied for first place in the Heisman. Heisman voting goes Mac Jones, Justin Fields, and Trevor Lawrence, all tied at plus 150 for the Heisman Trophy right now. It's going to be an exciting race to the finish line with, in all actuality, 5 weeks left. There's 5 weeks left of college football, and Ohio State has 3 games. 3 games under their belt so far, going to have to keep pushing through. Number 1, Alabama. They jumped up from the number 2 spot. They take on LSU coming off of the bye. LSU, we know, has been struggled. They just announced that Miles Brennan will not be playing due to COVID. The entire LSU team is actually under a COVID threat right now. A bunch of them are in potentials to completely miss the game. If that happens, this entire game is under a microscope because nobody knows what's going to happen. It's expected to be, if LSU can't play, obviously Bama gets another bye week, but that actually hurts them because LSU already has to remake a game against Florida later in the season. I believe it's going to be the conference championship week or the week before, depending on how the SEC is able to schedule. So Bama won't have an opportunity to make up the game against LSU. Obviously, everybody knows that they will probably win that game whether it's played or not. So that's the biggest question mark going into that. But this is how the top 12 racks out. I'll read it one more time. Miami 12, Georgia 11, Oregon at 10, Indiana at 9, BYU at 8, Cincinnati at 7, Texas at 6, Florida at 5, Clemson 4, Ohio State 3, Notre Dame at number 2, and at number 1, Alabama, the Crimson Tide on top still. That's been all for Breakdown this week. I'm Alek Koberna. Make sure to keep tuning in.